I have a very unpopular opinion about the Jussie Smollett situation. If you don't know the Jussie Smollett situation, it's a little bit comical and a lot horrific. Well, he was in Chicago. He's a star on a show called Empire. He's African American and he's homosexual. He was in Chicago, and said that two rednecks pulled up to him after he went to Subway, proceeded to beat him up for 60 seconds, and as they beat him up, they were yelling MAGA country or something, and they poured bleach on him, put a noose around his neck, and then left in Chicago. Even one of the neighbors said, I read, we don't believe his story because this whole neighborhood's mostly black and homosexual. So it's black and gay. So anyways, that happened, and it turns out that it was completely fabricated. He paid, and he said it was two white guys who attacked him, but it wasn't. It was two Nigerian actors, black guys, that he had known from, they were extras on the Empire set, paid them to buy red hats. They couldn't even find MAGA hats. They just bought red hats and rope, and he paid them to beat him up. Now, what's my unpopular opinion? My unpopular opinion is that we should forgive him. And I'm not saying that flippantly. I really mean it, and I'll tell you why. I study psychology, and what I do for money is I work with athletes and entrepreneurs, and I help them overcome a lot of flaws they have and shortcomings. And the human ego is so susceptible to victimhood. Jussie Smollett is a victim of victimhood, and hopefully he will atone for this. So we should have been skeptical, surely, about the story. It just sounds unbelievable on its face. Most of us were skeptical, weren't we? It's always the case, here's a good rule of thumb. When a racist attack happens, and it sounds like a bad straight-to-rental movie plot, and the characters sound like very generic racist, you know, rednecks and real racists have a certain grammar that they use. And go back home, get out of here is not really the way they communicate. Also, their tactics to intimidate typically aren't nooses and whatever. That's not what they do. So the whole story, when it sounds like a B-plot movie, then you're usually dealing with a fraud or a phony. And I think a lot of us saw that. We were skeptical. The only people who weren't skeptical are the people who are paid big bucks to be skeptical, which would be the journalists. But that's another discussion for another day. So anyways, I think we should forgive him because victimhood is contagious. And the left has promoted victimhood to the point where, you know, Jussie Smollett's looking at his career and thinking, I'm sort of making it. But when you're a victim, it can replace a lot of, replace a lack of talent. It can replace an inability to achieve the goals you want. It can provide a warp hole, a wormhole for you to forward your career. So from a certain perspective, it's entirely rational and logical for this guy to want to do what he did. Hey, if he gets away with it, my God, they might put him on a currency, you know? Might get his face on something. So it's a calculated risk, even though it's completely duplicitous and dishonest. The reason I say, again, we should forgive him is because it's sort of a disease, and it's spreading in this country on the left. I was just reading this article about a guy, there was a YouTube video about it too, I had to look more into it, who has to constantly drink water. He cannot stop drinking water. Maybe you saw it. He has to drink 20 liters a day or something like that, 4 or 5 gallons a day. Every 2 hours, he has to drink water. If he doesn't, he passes out. He could go into cardiac arrest or something like that. This is real. This isn't fake. Some guy has to drink water all day. It's called diabetes insipidus, I believe. It's a metabolic disorder or something like that. Anyways, he has to drink water all day, and the left has made victimhood like that. People on the left, the far left, cannot go a few hours without reading something that implies oppression, a denigration of rights, something like racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, Islamophobia. They need to drink that all day long. It's a disease. It's a weird disease because you need more of it. You're constantly thirsty for it. And I think it's like a disease, and it's also like a drug addiction. So you become addicted to victimhood, and you don't notice that you're engaging in extreme and bizarre behavior. People around you notice the twitch, your eyes are a little bit dilated more than usual, and you're going to extreme ends to meet that fix. Pretty soon, reading Slate and watching Vox doesn't get the fix. It's also I talk about this a lot on my channel, but it keeps coming up, so I'm going to talk about it again. I love Don Quixote, and my favorite chapter is the windmill chapter. And there's a few things that happen in the windmill chapter that are important. It's not just, so if you don't know the Don Quixote story, Don Quixote reads a lot of stuff, a lot of stuff. He reads a lot of books about knights, and he gets infatuated with what these knights did and their daring deeds and rescuing damsels and slaying dragons, and he wants to live that. The problem is that age has passed, but he still has to do it. Well, the civil rights era has mostly passed. The United States has made a ton of progress regarding civil rights, no doubt about it. There's still things we can do, and we have to be vigilant that we don't fall back. I don't think anybody would deny that, but a lot of the left are like modern-day Don Quixotes. Now, Don Quixote is kind of lovable and funny, but really he's still a dangerous person because he's engaging in battle with people who aren't doing anything wrong. So Don Quixote sees these windmills, and he is delusional, and he thinks they're monsters. So he jumps on his horse, he has his lance, and he charges towards the windmills. And when he gets to the windmills knock him off his horse, right? Well, you'd think that's the end of it. He'd wake up and say, wow, those are windmills. They were never monsters. The media, the journalists get knocked off their horse. There's no racism here. There's none with the Covington kids. There's none with Jussie Smollet. Maybe there's not as much racism as we think. Maybe these monsters we're seeing are windmills. But just like Don Quixote, when he's knocked off that horse, what he says is, the magician tricked me. He didn't trick me. As soon as I charged at those windmills and I got knocked off my horse, right at the last minute, he changed them to windmills. They were monsters, but they changed them. And what the journalist and the left is doing is saying, sure, right, this wasn't racism, right? But it's still there. There were monsters there. That just wasn't it. It was the right switched out the real racism and gave us this is a little bit of a fake story, but the real racism's there. It's a bit of a mixed metaphor, but you understand what I'm saying, or analogy. And, that goes back to the narrative. The narrative. There's a few words I'm sick of, and narrative is one of them, but it keeps cropping up. You can start your timer now for the amount of time. You can start your timer now for a countdown regarding the narrative talk. And that's what the left's going to do. Sure, this specific incident wasn't accurate. Sure, this happened with the Covington kids, wasn't accurate. But the broader theme is real. The broader problem of racism is happening. So, never mind reality. That's what they're saying. The fiction's better than the truth. And when you're a victim, I do a lot of peak performance again, and we always talk about visualization. Something vividly imagined is no different than reality. So we tell athletes to visualize things. We tell entrepreneurs to visualize their success. And they do, and the brain thinks it's real. Same thing's happening here. The left will visualize and fantasize victimhood, and it feels real in their nervous system. And it's really disappointing because there are real cases of racism, and there are things that happen. Everybody says this. You have to say this now. It's crazy you have to say this now, that there are real incidents of racism. But you do have to say that, and this overshadows it. I literally one time was walking by a construction site here in New York City, and this is the conversation there. It was two white construction workers, and one guy said, "Hey, you going to watch the game tonight?" The guy says, "No, I'm busy." And the other construction worker says, "You're racist, man." It was just meaningless. There was a meaningless reply to a guy saying you can't watch the game. You can't watch the game because you're racist. It's lost all meaning. It's just it's another word. I heard this funny joke one time that if you walk up to a girl, it's a douchebag joke, but if you walk up to a girl and she says, "Hey," you say, "Hey, how's it going? Can I go out with you?" And she says, "I have a boyfriend." You say, "Jellyfish." And she goes, "What do you, jellyfish? What's that mean?" You say, "Oh, I thought we were talking about things that weren't important." You could basically replace jellyfish with racism at this point because it's losing all of its sting. So is Nazi, so is fascist. And on the right's kind of done that as well. We overuse the word socialist. And now we got some real socialists in our midst, and we've used the word too much. I remember watching Milton Friedman, and he was on Uncommon Knowledge, I think it was with Peter Robinson or somebody, and he said, "Yeah, I call Bill Clinton a socialist." And I thought, I don't know about that. I thought that was a little bit of a reach for Milton Friedman. God forbid I criticize him. I don't want to, but I just thought it was an overuse of the word. That's all I'm saying. I like Milton Friedman. I love his ideas. So I'm not bashing him at all. I'm just saying I think we may have used the word socialist a little bit too much, even with Obama. And now that we have real bona fide socialists, soi-disant socialists, well, no, like AOC and Bernie Sanders, we doesn't have the sting. So, anyways, just my thoughts. We should forgive Jussie Smollet. What do you guys think? Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Talk to you soon. Bye.